Hello friends, today we bring you a story about nuns who are eager to fall in love. One day a young man comes to their church, and one by one, the nuns enjoy his company. The story begins in a time when the plague is terrorizing the land. We meet a man named Tandira, who works as a painter in a church. Tandira hasn't received his payment for a long time, so he goes to the priest to collect his money, only to find that the priest has died. Tandira then thinks, why not become the new priest of the church? So he puts on the priest's robes and pretends to be him. Next, we meet a young man named Lorenzo, who is being chased by some people because he stole money from a man named Jonathan, a government official. Jonathan seeks revenge and fights with Lorenzo, but Lorenzo somehow manages to escape. Then we see Pampinia, the daughter of a wealthy merchant. Her father dies from the plague, and Jonathan appears, offering his condolences. However, his help comes with the expectation of a sexual favor. Pampinia says she has promised to marry the Prince of Russia, who is on his way. As she begins to leave, Jonathan reveals that her father had accumulated a large debt, and he, Jonathan, paid it off. Her father had promised her hand in marriage to Jonathan in exchange. Pampinia insists on her commitment to the Russian prince. Lorenzo is seen riding on a horse, fleeing as Jonathan's soldiers pursue him. Along the way, he encounters a stranger pushing a cart with a dead body on it. Lorenzo asks him about the path ahead. The man replies that the road leads to a convent where many nuns reside, and the body he is carrying is that of a gardener. He mentions that he is returning from there. Lorenzo inquires if he could get a job as a gardener at the convent. The man replies that it's unlikely because Lorenzo lacks the required qualities. When Lorenzo asks about the deceased gardener, he learns that the gardener was mute and deaf, which is precisely what they require for the job. Lorenzo sarcastically remarks that being mute and deaf is not a special quality. To evade Jonathan's men, Lorenzo climbs a tree and hides. The soldiers fail to spot him, but after some time, the branch he is on breaks, and he falls, losing consciousness. A while later, a group of beautiful nuns discovers him and takes him back to the convent. Two nuns come to check on him, and they examine him in a way that suggests they haven't seen a man in years. One of them comments on whether he has broken any bones, but she's actually referring to another weapon of his. They begin touching him and lift his shirt, kissing his stomach. The act leaves one of the nuns in a daze, and she urges the other to do the same. The second nun also kisses him. Lorenzo, who is conscious but pretending to be unconscious, remains still. One of the nuns starts kissing his lips, but at this point, Lorenzo opens his eyes, startling them. Just then, the Mother Superior arrives, and the nuns quickly cover their faces, telling her they believe the man is mute and deaf. Hearing this, the Mother Superior is delighted, thinking that a mute and deaf man would make a perfect lover since no one would ever find out. Mother Lorenzo asks if Lorenzo is mute and deaf. Lorenzo indicates that he is both mute and deaf. Then, Mother asks the two nuns to bathe Lorenzo. While bathing him, the nuns play a playful game with him. Meanwhile, Pampinia, feeling troubled by Jonathan, goes to the church with her friend. Everyone there is a virgin. Pampinia tells her friend that Jonathan wants to marry her, but her marriage is already arranged with Mark, and she wants to marry him. One of her friends says that Pampinia should first look at Prince Mark. Another friend tells her to be quiet, as they cannot take another's fiancé before marriage. At that moment, Jonathan arrives and asks what they are doing there, reminding them that there's a lockdown. They decide to send Pampinia to a convent until Prince Mark arrives. Then, one friend brings a carriage with a disguised priest, and they all leave. Pampinia also leaves in another carriage. After reaching the convent, they strip her of her dress and make her a nun. Pampinia thinks her virginity will be safe here, but she doesn't know that the caves are being dug day and night there. Pampinia then notices Lorenzo and asks the nuns who he is. The nuns tell her that he is a gardener who works very hard. Hearing this, Pampinia begins to like him. Later, Lorenzo is working in the garden when a nun, who is different from the others, calls him, and they engage in a romantic moment behind a tree. Pampinia sees them and feels jealous. Meanwhile, Prince Mark arrives at the palace where he meets Jonathan. Prince Mark talks about the importance of his name. He mistakenly assumes Jonathan is Pampinia's father and says that he has brought a gift for Jonathan and his wife. Jonathan clarifies that he is not Pampinia's father, to which Mark replies that he must be her grandfather. Jonathan corrects him, saying he is Pampinia's future husband. Prince Mark finds this amusing and leaves. On the way, they meet a man who tells Mark that Pampinia has gone to the convent and will marry him. Hearing this, Mark heads in that direction. At the convent, two nuns come to Lorenzo's room and engage in romantic conversation. They begin undressing blessing. Meanwhile, other nuns are on their way to bathe Lorenzo. One of the nuns tells Pampanea that she will show Lorenzo the cave today, but Pampanea says this is a sin. The nuns respond that they know Pampanea is jealous, but they will still love him today. However, they are unable to proceed with their plan. They pour water into Lorenzo's tub and invite Pampanea inside, but she refuses. After Lorenzo is ready, Mother Nun takes him to the mother. There, the Mother Nun engages in a lot of love with Lorenzo. Pampanea feels very jealous seeing all this because she had fallen in love with Lorenzo. The next day, while Lorenzo is working in the garden, Pampanea is reading a book nearby. Lorenzo looks at Pampanea strangely and thinks of beating a drum. A little while later, Pampanea comes to his room, and Lorenzo understands why she is there. Lorenzo starts to remove her veil, but Pampanea stops him, ties a blindfold over his eyes, and says she wants to marry him. After this, she kisses him. Later, a carriage arrives at the convent to take Pampanea because Prince Mark has arrived there. However, Pampanea doesn't want to leave Lorenzo, so she tells the Mother Superior that Lorenzo is not mute or deaf. The Mother Superior asks how she knows this, and Pampanea replies that she heard him singing in the garden. To confirm, the Mother Superior goes to Lorenzo and says in his ear, "Your ear is cut." Startled, Lorenzo shouts, and realizing he has been caught, pretends it's a miracle. The Mother Superior, realizing he can speak and hear, kicks him out of the convent. As Pampanea prepares to leave as well, Lorenzo asks her to take him along. The two leave together. Meanwhile, Prince Mark arrives at a pond to drink water and sees a beautiful woman bathing. He asks, "Are you human?" To which she replies, "I am a mermaid." Mark confesses that he loves a girl named Pampanea. The woman then reveals herself to be Pampanea, and Mark's love story begins. On the other hand, Pampanea and Lorenzo arrive at a church, where Pampanea asks Lorenzo if he loves someone. He replies, "Yes, but I haven't seen her beautiful face yet. She kissed me once." Here, Pampanea asks Lorenzo to close his eyes for a moment to remember if she is the same girl he wanted to kiss. Just as they are about to kiss, Jonathan arrives. Pampanea tells Lorenzo to run away, but Lorenzo shows courage and stays. Jonathan attacks Lorenzo and beats him badly. When Jonathan is about to kill Lorenzo, Pampanea tells him that if he kills Lorenzo, she will never marry him. Hearing this, Jonathan spares Lorenzo, but locks him up in a prison. A few days later, Pampanea tells Jonathan that she will only marry him if he releases Lorenzo. This angers Jonathan, but he agrees to her condition. However, Pampanea has no intention of marrying Jonathan. She lies to save Lorenzo's life. Pampanea then meets a fake priest and explains the entire situation to him. The priest agrees to help her. Meanwhile, Jonathan orders two of his soldiers to take Lorenzo far away. Lorenzo, however, outsmarts the soldiers and heads back toward Pampanea. On the other side, Jonathan's wedding ceremony is taking place. The priest deliberately delays the wedding by asking absurd questions, and eventually asks Jonathan to show his hands. When Jonathan shows his hands, the priest comments on how dirty they are and tells him to wash them. Enraged, Jonathan washes his hands and returns, only to hold his sword against the priest's neck. At that moment, Prince Mark arrives with Lorenzo. Together, they confront Jonathan and overpower him. Jonathan tries to escape, but Lorenzo fights him and ultimately pushes him into a well. Pampanea arrives and tells Prince Mark that she cannot marry him. This leaves Prince Mark in shock. When Pampanea reveals her face, Mark says, "You are not Pampanea. The Pampanea I met was at the pond." Just then, another Pampanea enters. After this, Lorenzo starts to leave. Pampanea stops him and asks, "Where are you going?" He replies, "I am going to find the girl who kissed me, and I will marry her." At this moment, Pampanea asks Lorenzo to close his eyes and kisses him. Lorenzo instantly recognizes her, and with that, the story ends.